Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, a safe space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson. I'm an adoptive mom of a 19-year-old son, Joey, who's in recovery from addiction and who is struggling to find his path. I'm walking beside him and working on my own personal growth and healing while he's working on his as well. He and I are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. We are just switching our name from Safe Home Podcast to Unraveling Adoption, and this is the first full episode under our new name. So welcome to those who followed us here from Safe Home, and welcome to anyone who's new here. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and help us get the word out about Unraveling Adoption. Quick heads up, there are a couple of very brief mentions of suicide attempts in this episode. Today's guest is Leslie Pate Mackinnon, a licensed clinical social worker and an adoption activist for the past 30 years. Leslie is a seasoned and well-respected therapist in the adoption community. She's a nationally known trainer who travels across the country training therapists, agencies, and child welfare workers about the psychological issues inherent in adoption and third-party reproduction. Following 4 decades of successful practice in Atlanta, Leslie and her husband relocated to Asheville, North Carolina. Leslie comes to this work by way of being a birth mother in the 1960s, the baby scoop era. She understands adoption trauma deeply, both as a lived experience and as a therapist for all members in the adoption constellation, adoptees, birthparents, and adoptive parents. On Safe Home Podcast, we've had 8 episodes with adoptees, 1 episode with another adoptive parent, but this is our first episode from the birth mother's perspective, which is a super critical piece of this puzzle. I'm so grateful you're here to tell us your story, Leslie. Thank you so much, and welcome to Unraveling Adoption.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for bringing my voice to the table. One of the things I've said since I've been doing this work is all of our voices need to be at the table.
Yes.
And I'm 100% supportive of adoptees having the main microphone as it needs to be.
Yep.
But the rest of us have a real big part in this too.
Yep.
You're a mama. I'm a mama. You know, we all need to be heard and we need to understand each other better.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And yes, I agree that adoptees' voices always are prioritized in any room that I'm in. And the reason that is because they had no choice in this whole thing. You had some bit of choice, maybe not all that of choice, but you had some bit of choice, and I had the most choice. So adoptive parents get to be on the lowest rung of the ladder, but that's okay. We're still in the room and we're still at the table. And we all are struggling with different elements of loss through this whole adoption process. So we're not going to compare or say, my loss is better than your loss, but we're just all going to have empathy for all of the different parts of this whole, they used to call it a triad or a triangle, but now they call it a constellation, right? Because so it's a little more inclusive.
Right. And that's the other thing about positive adoption language. It's always changing, but it is trying to be more comprehensive. Does it cover the fact? Just like you said, Beth, when I first heard that adoptees' voices needed to have more impetus, more support, more meaning, more getting out there, I was like, well, yeah, they didn't have a decision, but gee, many crickets, they were an infant. You know, they were a 3-year-old in need of a home. Certainly, you little infant can understand that we big people had to make a decision for you. That's just the tip of it. The bad part is we continue to tell adoptees, birth parents and adoptive parents and professionals what their experience is like.
Yes.
That's the real bummer, is that we don't ever let up. We just keep on saying to them, well, aren't you grateful? Or, oh, gee, but think you would have been eating garbage in a big garbage dump in India, and all these horrible things that get said to children sometimes, by the way. But it's that they never got their voice.
Yes.
We all told them what adoption was all about, and they're telling us, wrongo.
Yeah.
Wrong. You got some things right, but you got a heck of a lot of it wrong. And let us tell you what it's like.
Yes. Even the fact that we call them adopted children, they grow up, people, they're grown ass adults. They have thoughts. So
right.
I think there's some people trying to change that language around the child piece of it. But yeah, I think as an adoptive parent, the most important piece of anything that I've ever done in this whole arena is listening to other adult adoptees, especially the adult adoptees who have done work.
Yes.
That have done their own work to try to come out of the fog, as they say, and do their own therapy. And they've kind of got to the others, or not there's two sides or like that, but, and not like there's anything ever done, but like they've worked through a bunch of their shit.
Yeah.
They've worked through a lot of it, and they are able to come and tell us, yeah, this is how it felt when the guy said this to me. That is so important for us APs to listen to.
Right.
That has changed everything about how I see Joey is listening to other adult adoptees.
Right. Yeah. And getting rid of some of these tapes we were under about trying to do what was best for the child, or the child, there I go again, but trying to help them or save them.
Yeah.
And that's a really negative approach to take with somebody. I'm here to save you.
Yeah.
That is just so demeaning.
Yeah.
And that's not how I think anybody started with that. But come on, people, how about we look at their richness? How about we look at their diversity? Because they're part and parcel of every human life.
That's right. It all goes together. And so many layers. It's just in layers, and it's like peeling an onion. Like, okay, what else is in there? What else is in there? Yeah. Oh, there's so much. But I'm so glad you're here to talk. And I think it's really important for people to understand the birth parents' perspective. And you know what? There's not that many birth parents that are willing to tell their whole story. A lot of adoptees kind of feel suppressed, like they can't tell their story. But I think birth parents, even worse, have more suppression and like, oh God, I can't tell all that happened. I think probably we know way more birth parents than we know that we know, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There's so many that just don't tell anybody that it happened. And like, we just won't talk about that.
Right. Oh, when I call it came out of the closet, suddenly my gay friends and I were going, okay, now I get it. And in the same closet, but slightly different closet, but it was a sexual shame closet.
Yes.
So I kind of know what you felt about this. Because, birth parents do get a lot of shame heaped on them prior to a relinquishment. It's, oh, God, you're so courageous. Oh, you're giving this gift. Oh, my God, how much you love this child that you would give it up. And then all of a sudden, once the paperwork is signed, we're kind of yesterday's news.
Okay, we're done with you. Yep.
And on your way. And then if a birth parent in today's realm says, oh, well, I wasn't able to raise my child and I placed them for adoption, one of their own friends will go, you gave away your own child? Ooh, oof. I could never do that. Okay, ouch, whack. Which is it? Am I an angel?
Yeah.
Or am I the devil incarnate?
Yeah, it's one or the other, right? And there's nothing like just in between. It's just very complex and complicated.
Because it is complex. Yeah.
Very. So you got pregnant in the 1960s, pre-Roe.
Yes.
And what were your options at that time? Like, what did you go, okay, well, I have 6 options, or like, was there like one option?
Well, actually, there were 2.
2 options.
If you were pregnant and it was mid-1960s, you either got married, which gave you the chance to parent your child, or if you were a single white female from a middle class, super middle class family, no big aspersions for anything, you relinquished your child to adoption because your life was going to be over if you tried to single parent. Yeah. Sometimes when I'm talking to people your age and younger, I go, I know you can't possibly remember this or know this was a time, and I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't been there. Because one day I lived in this very Victorian world where if I came home after a date and I wasn't in the door within 3 minutes, the front door light started going click, 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 click. Because what in the world would the neighbors think? I kind of sort of doubt they were peeking out their window right in the middle of, the Lawrence Welk show to see if Leslie made it home and if she was kissing her boyfriend in the driveway. I doubt it, but my mother was certain they were. So we went from that era where she watched my every move Never gave me any information, I might add. I had no idea how a baby got here.
Shoot.
But she did keep an eye on my behavior in a way to the sexual revolution. And I want you to know that it occurred almost overnight. It happened in the late 60s and early 70s. And suddenly everything was loosey-goosey, airy-fairy. Yes, of course you could raise a child without being married. I often tell people, I remember when Cher decided to have Greg Allman's baby. And she wasn't going to marry him. And she just raised her child all by herself. And that was like
what?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a big flip in time. Really, but back to the question, my options, marriage or relinquishment.
And I guess some people might have a third option. If you're very wealthy, you go to another country or somewhere and go get an abortion.
Absolutely.
Or you do a back alley kind of abortion.
Absolutely. I'm sure that happened. I had no clue about a back alley abortion because I was a good girl.
Yeah. Didn't even know how babies started. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so there was that other, if you were very wealthy, I know by stories after the fact that I did talk to people whose parents sent them to New York or, someplace or out of the country, and they did get an abortion. So that was the possibility of the third option. I grew up in a good Catholic family. That was not on the table anywhere, shape, or form.
Right. Not even.
And that's fine. I often say today, even though I relinquished 2 sons for adoption, Beth, and that still hurts my heart to say I did something not once, but twice. I'm also glad that I don't have to have my religion drawn into it as another frigging mistake I made. Okay, let's just leave it here. Yeah. And I don't have to feel good old Catholic guilt about other things. Yeah. So I got plenty in my bucket.
Yeah, you got enough already. But the Catholic piece, they probably thought that was the angel part of your relinquishment, is that, you did the right thing. You were so loving and gave your child a better, So, okay. Yeah.
So those were the options. And specifically in my case, I was the cheerleader who didn't marry the football player. He said he was going to, but then his parents got involved in our situation and said all kinds of nasty, horrible things about me and to me. No. And basically the bottom line was I wasn't going to ruin their son's life.
Shoot.
So they took him back to college and called my family and said, if you need money, we have some. And my family righteously hung up on them and said, please don't ever darken our door again. So
man.
That's
pretty ugly. So you two would have gotten married. You liked each other. Would have.
First love, and in that way that I guess we all have one. First love.
I just don't know what the hell you're doing.
Madly in love, would have done anything, and probably would have been divorced 2 years later. Heaven only knows. I can't write that script any better, but yes, that would have been the plan. Yeah. But instead, we went to plan B, and I ended up in a maternity home 100 miles away from my hometown, though the story in my hometown was, because I had just started my freshman year at college, that I'd been given this fantastic opportunity to go study abroad in France. And I actually had some cousins who lived in France.
Oh, no way.
So all of my mail from the maternity home, I mailed to my cousin in France.
Oh, my
She mailed to my friends at home in Florida, 100 miles down the road.
Oh, no.
They wrote back to France.
You got to be kidding.
These ordeals of layers of lies, which was the other thing. You say you don't hear much from birth mothers. Well, from my era, we were told to zip it.
Do not talk about this ever again.
Like, don't ever tell anybody this happened because nobody will like you, respect you, want to be around you, etc. So we were told to keep quiet. And it took me 35 years.
I don't doubt it.
Finally come out of the closet of my own making. And the worst thing that can happen to you is to have this kind of trauma and not be able to speak it. And I'm saying that real purposely because that's the boat that adopted individuals are in.
A lot of, yep.
They had a lot of trauma. We're just now beginning to understand how much. they don't always even know how much.
Right.
And that's because of what we call them being in the fog. They too were fed all the misconceptions that the industry puts out there. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it takes them a while to come out. For the 35 years I was in the closet, if anybody asked me, like my shrink, the one person who might know, I'd say, oh, I did the very best thing I could.
Yeah.
And he'd say, are you ever going to search for them? And I'd go, oh, no, I can't do that. I cannot disrupt their lives. I have done enough damage to them. I can't do any more. If they want to find me, I've left all these letters. Every time I move and change address, I write another letter. They can find me. And they are told in the letters that I can't wait to meet them. But I am not allowed to do anything else. I'm in a support group one time and somebody said, not allowed. What'll happen to you if you do it? And I sat there and I went, you mean there are no adoption police?
Yeah. Who's going to come after you?
All of a sudden it just dawned on me. That was absurd.
Yeah.
Who did I think was going to come get me? But I really felt like it was against the law.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it felt like that. How old were you when you?
17.
17. Yeah.
17
You're
and then 19.
Under your parents' thumb and, just have no autonomy. And yeah, it probably did feel like the law.
But I want to say about that adoptees get stuck in that same boat. They get stuck in the boat of what we're telling people about adoption, not about what they're feeling about adoption. Mm-hmm. And we have to really move over and make some room.
Yes.
This is where I say my voice is important. Your voice is important. Theirs is important. And we have got to start making room for all of the segments to begin to speak about.
Yes.
And with adoptees, I know because I've worked with them for so many years, from 7 years old, 6 years old, all the way up to adulthood. Sometimes we have to prime the pump a little. In fact, I often talk about my work in adoption as very close to my work in addiction. I happen to be in recovery, and that's purely from the life that I went through.
That was your coping mechanism.
Right. I went to see one psychiatrist, and he gave me an antidepressant. My mother took it out of my hand and flushed it down the toilet.
No way.
And said, you're not taking that stuff.
Oh, no.
So I found alcohol in college.
Sure. That's a great
you tell
one.
I was cured.
Yeah. It fixes all your ills, right? Oh, man.
So we will use some of these other substances to help us get through these, the variety of losses we've experienced.
Yeah.
Oh, but what I was going back to was, I think it's such a big lineup between adoption and addiction, because I used to say about addiction, addiction's the one disease that the biggest symptom is you don't know you've got the disease. That's the biggest symptom of the disease, is you're the only one who believes you don't have it. Everybody around you said, oh, I think
yeah.
But you don't think you have it. Well, guess what? In adoption, you have all these things going on, but until you find that little doorway and pathway out of the fog, you don't think you have it going on.
Right. So much denial.
Because I would just repeat. And one of the things I train a lot of therapists, and I say to therapists is, if you ever get one of me in your office, and she's older, and she says, I did the very best thing I could. Stop in your head. You don't have to stop her. Let her talk, because she hadn't had much time talking about it if she just said
Yeah.
Okay. But know that she is in the fog, in the closet. You've got a lot of work to do with her. And just like in addiction, it's slow work. Because when you get to the conclusion before they do, they'll be certain to tell you all the ways you're wrong.
Yeah.
So you have to let them discover it while you're standing with them and sitting with them. That's what I'm guessing you do with Joey.
Yeah.
You make room for him. Boy, if it was me, Joey, I'd be thinking A, B, C, and D.
Yes. I wonder if.
Yes. I wonder if, do you ever think about her?
Yes.
You ever wonder if she thinks about you? I wonder about that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Opening up those possibilities that he's like, oh, you mean I can wonder about that? That's okay to wonder? Yes. You can wonder. Yes. I wish I had done this better when he was little, but I didn't know. I adopted from Japan, They told me zero things about adoption trauma. I mean, I don't think they say that word in Japan.
I'm sure they don't. Yeah.
So, I was like, la, 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 everything's fine until, he tried to kill himself and was deep into addiction. Then I'm like, okay, let me go look into this stuff. And when you were talking about addiction, I am very interested in that intersection between addiction and adoption. I'm starting to do speeches about it and really go out into the world talking about that. It's a very important intersection to me. But is it a surprise at all that the substances that my son chose are depressants and they numb you out and completely black out your cognition? Is that a surprise? No, because you know what? His pain is so intense. He wanted it to be gone. It's not like he took uppers and wanted to live life in greater, vivid.
Please don't make this any more intense.
So he did not go to cocaine and meth and all that stuff. He went to cannabis, which is excellent way to get away from all of that, and alcohol and cough medicine, DXM, which knocks you completely out and dissociates you.
Yep.
So God bless him. He was trying to fix his pain just like you did with alcohol. Just like, oh, this works.
Absolutely.
Because you know what? Because our system had never helped him with his mental health or with his adoption trauma to give him other tools. Right. And so he's like, oh, some kid offered him a vape and he's like, oh, check that box. That worked.
I still remember, this may be TMI for a radio broadcast, but I remember when I took my first hit off of a joint. I was 22. I'd graduated college and we were a little small group trying it the first time. And before you know it, I was rolling on the floor laughing. And I remember thinking, I don't remember when I laughed last.
Yep.
Now, this is after college. Remember that I entered college by relinquishing 2 sons, which would have been my freshman and sophomore years. And so all of a sudden, I could laugh.
Yeah.
I could feel good. This was like unheard of.
Why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, come on. That makes total sense. And Joey's told me that first time that he took a hit off the vape pen, that
his eyes probably just lit up.
Absolutely. He's like, okay, that'll do. Thank you so much.
Right.
That was great.
Right.
And then the way he did it, he just went all out. Like, give me the biggest one, the most potent one. Just give it to me, all of it. And he about killed himself several times. So that's where we're at. God help us. But you just, if you can realize that we are just trying to do the best we can, everybody. And when you can find a substance that can solve so many problems, why wouldn't you? So we as a culture need to come around people and give them other better options.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I throw out a name for you, which I'm sure you've run across, but don't miss Paul Sunderland.
That video was transformative. That I saw that early on in my discovery of adoption trauma. I'll link it in the notes. Adoption and addiction. He put the two together and made an amazing video. I don't even think he's in the adoption community at all.
He's not.
He's an addiction guy.
He came in by the sideways doors, which now, thank heavens, we're getting more and more that are going.
Hopefully more studies in it. But yeah, he linked the two together and it's 40% greater incidence of addiction over a lifetime for adopted people rather than 40% more. Yeah. 40%.
Of course.
Yeah.
And when I began training, one of the places, in fact, I can say this, my own son that I raised ended up in residential treatment. He had severe depression I remember when he was like 7 years old, talking about killing himself and so forth.
Wow.
But when I went to his treatment center first, I looked around and I thought, well, this is weird. I think about 60% of the kids are adopted.
So many, or foster care. Yeah.
And then other places I've been are 80% adopted. And so now I can say that to you in very clear terminology. The task of adolescence is forming your identity.
Yep.
And forming your identity is oftentimes in in reaction to your parents. My husband and I used to say, okay, I'll dye my hair blue. You get the nail in your nose. And then they'll both have to react to us and probably become very conservative religious people.
Yeah. They test out all the different ways, Right. That's their job. And the adoption piece just adds a whole other layer.
Another thing, because if you don't have that information, which you should have from
They should have. Her. Yes.
Now we know, but if you don't have it, you're trying to figure out who am I in a dish that you can't see through. This is ridiculous. So,
One other little piece about Joey's first foray into addiction is guess who he used with? Other Asian kids. My son's Japanese. We adopted him from Japan. He found the other Asian outcasts, found his little family. I mean, it fits so many things for him. It just checked all the boxes. So
absolutely. I'm in a group. I belong.
Yeah.
I look like somebody.
Yes, exactly. They're all getting bullied. They were in a predominantly white school. They were getting bullied every single day. It's horrible.
Sure.
So, God bless him. I don't blame him one bit.
And again, I always want adoptive parents to hear, get in there and talk with your kids as early as you can. And if it's 19, thank God it's 19. And if it's 25, thank God it's then and not never. But get in there and talk, because adopted individuals have told me for years and years, and I have no reason not to believe them, how protective they are of their adoptive parents.
Yes.
And guess what? When they meet their birth parents, they're really protective of their birth parents too. They don't want to hurt anybody. And if you'd been on that kind of top of a pin where you weren't quite sure what you did to cause yourself to be adoption, you wouldn't hurt anybody either.
That's right. You'd be the best kid ever. Exactly.
You would bend over backwards, trying not to piss them off or anybody.
Don't want to be given away again.
No. Sure. So we have to let them know we don't like it any better than they do, but we're very comfortable talking about all the dirt in adoption. Come on, there's plenty of it.
Yep.
There's plenty of dirt in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And we talk about it in our family. We're not going to sweep it under the rug anymore.
I think the more you talk about it, the better, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Even if you goof up, like car. Yeah, in the car. Oh, car is really good because you can't look at
the
the best. Let's go for a ride. Let's go for a long ride. No, that's great. That's really great. Yeah, I agree. And even if you fuck it up sometimes and say the wrong stuff, it's okay. Just talk and maybe get an adoption competent therapist on board with you if you can. And it can only help. Just open up that door because they'll know that they can talk about it.
It's the shutting off. One of the things I say that happened to my segment of the group in adoption was we were told way back then, keep it quiet. And to hold that much inside your whole life and never speak to, the damage is unbelievable. In fact, I laughingly say, I basically was told to disassociate. Yeah. It's a psychiatric defense mechanism. If trauma gets too big. And so they sent me out the door saying, pretend this never happened. Pretend it was a bad dream. Yeah. You'll go on and have other children. It just was a period. It'll be over. Yeah. And so I tried my best to do that for 35 years. I dissociated from myself. When I finally got used to my new role as an activist, I realized one of the biggest things I'd done for myself, Beth, was to reintegrate myself.
Nice.
Here was this girl over here who lost her 2 firstborn. And here was this, turned out to be a successful therapist over here that didn't ever talk about this stuff. But I had separated us out.
Like 2 different people. Yeah.
Like 2 different people.
Wow.
And coming back together was so healing for me.
Yes.
To put me all in one piece again.
Yes, because it's all you. It's all you.
Yeah.
Now, we better hear how you had the second child.
Okay. So, yes, I had my first son. I did everything according to the maternity home rule book.
Yes.
I went through all the steps and I was going to relinquish him and I made him clothes and I did all these kinds of things and I nurtured and I crocheted him a hat and a scarf and all this. But then I was going to go on and leave and get on with my life and do just what they told me to do. So my mother's good idea on that plan was, let's send her to a Catholic girls' school.
Okay.
What's missing there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boys, maybe no pregnancies.
Right.
Wrong. Because there was a boys' school 10 miles away.
Oh, not that hard.
You make a girls' school without a boys' school.
Oh, good Lord.
Yes. My very first date, terrified because I had this big secret and I was in a different state, in a different town. I didn't think anybody knew, but you never knew when somebody would know. Yeah. And so that fella brought along that night some Rebel Yell. That's bourbon in the South, Rebel Yell. And on one pint, my date and I got shit-faced. I blacked out. And the next morning I said, oh, I didn't do anything, did I? I don't think I did, but I kind of feel like I did. Oh my God, I didn't, did I? Long story short, he then left school and went to Vietnam. I did do something. Oh man. That one night, I got pregnant.
You were very fertile.
Honey girl.
Oh my God.
Fertile myrtle right here. I get pregnant by looking at somebody.
Oh my God.
And so he was gone. I was pregnant. And Beth, I couldn't speak it. I was so horrified by myself that there was no way I could say the words out loud. Wow. And I told my parents I didn't like the school I was at, so I'd go home to school the next year. I just ate everything I could and gained 75 pounds and wore these big tent dresses. And 3 days before I gave birth, my stepdad did sit down with me and say, I don't know quite how to say this, but you put on so much weight and you look like you did when you were pregnant with Joseph. Uh-oh. And I remember, this is like burned in my brain, put that in the form of a question. He didn't. He just made the statement, and I just sat there with my face wet, sheet of tears, crying and looking at him. And he got up and left, and I cried myself to sleep, I suppose. And 3 days later, I delivered my son myself alone in the bathroom. And I was so, quote unquote, out of it. It was kind of like, I kept thinking, am I having a miscarriage? I knew I was pregnant, but I just kept pushing it back. Like something will come to me tomorrow. I'll figure out how I'm going to deal with this. I did try to kill myself a couple of times, chickened out. I did try to harm him, drank a bottle of castor oil, threw myself down the stairs, but chickened out before I could do anything worse, thank God.
Wow.
He was born. I wrapped him up in a blanket and we laid there and slept. And I can't tell you for how long, because I have no idea how long his birth took or anything. But my mother came home from work that evening and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, let me in the bathroom." And I said, "Well, I have to tell you something first." Oh, God. There's a baby in here with me.
Oh, Lordy.
Well, decades later, she told me she thought I'd slipped my cog. I had, but because every time I saw a baby, I cried.
Oh, okay.
And so she thought I'd kidnapped someone's baby.
Oh, really? But then she saw the placenta and
she opened the door and there's blood everywhere and a brand new infant. And she goes, well, that wasn't it. We'll figure this all out later.
Wow. Change of plans. Wow.
She called our family doctor, who was our best friend, and they took my son. Nobody asked me a word. And they placed him for adoption. And it was not mentioned again until I went to the psychiatrist, which I begged to do. "Mom, there's something wrong with me." And he gave me the antidepressants and flushed him down the toilet and said, "You're not going back to talk to that guy."
Oh, shoot.
So I hung on by my fingernails until I got out of college and could afford to get in therapy.
Oh my God. I am so sorry that all happened to you. That just breaks my heart. And this is why I think it's so important that you're willing to share this story, because I don't think anyone thinks about what you guys go through, what the birth mother goes through, and how much care you really needed and did not get. How much therapy, like deep therapy you needed and did not have the option of getting at all. Is it better nowadays, or is it still really tough for birth parents?
I think it's still pretty difficult. And this is going to be difficult for a lot of parents to hear. And I guess I'm saying adoptive parents, but there's still a lot that women who are pregnant and thinking about adoption as one alternative still struggle with, and that is nobody stepping up to the plate to help them honestly look at their options.
Yes.
The leading component of adoption is poverty for women. Yeah. It's not, I didn't want my child.
Right.
I was 17. I didn't honestly want to be married and be a settled down lady. I was just getting ready to, go be my own person. But when it came between giving up my firstborn child and being a settled down lady, I'd be a settled down lady any day. Yeah. You look at that baby in your lap and you're like, yeah. And that was the first time I realized at 17, this baby looks just like me and his birth father. Oh my God. And in fact, this is an aside. I went to this 56-year-old baby's wedding 2 weeks ago. And the first time ever, he has a picture with his birth father and his birth mother. It took him 56 years to see himself reflected in these two people.
Oh, that's amazing.
I adore his family. It was so fun being at that wedding because I was saying to them, y'all, we got 30 years of history with each other. Yeah. Yes, I missed a lot. And yes, my intrusion must have scared the bejesus out of you guys. Yeah. But we all love him.
Yes.
And that's all that's important.
That's so great.
That's all that's important is we do the best for him first, and then we try to take care of ourselves next.
Yeah. How many birth parents do you think really, really should not be mothering? A lot of the trope is like, well, we're protecting you from your birth family. They're drug addicts or they're whatever, gang members or mentally ill. Like, how much is it that? And how much is it just young and unprepared and have no options?
Young, unprepared, have no options, don't know what to do. I came into being in my social work therapeutic career at the time. This really does age me, but I love to say this because other people go, oh, I thought sexual abuse within families was always known. No, it wasn't. It did not become known until Christina Crawford wrote the book, Mommy Dearest.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
That is the first time in American history it began to become known that abuse was occurring within families. Some of it physical, some of it sexual, every brand, every variety. But we actually didn't know it existed within families. We weren't talking about it. So the first thing when I was working with families in the early 70s, and we were now talking about sexual abuse and incest, was get rid of the perpetrator, pull that guy right out. And I say guy because it is more often, but it's not exclusive. Out of the family, get the family safe. Well, guess what happened next? The family fell apart. You take the breadwinner out of the family, and then we can't pay the bills. And then there's all this drama. And then the child who reported the abuse, well, they feel guilty because they just broke up their whole family. And if they just kept their mouth shut and endured it, everything would be okay.
Yeah.
So we learned real quickly that that wasn't the best way to deal with families in this situation. So we backed up and we found a way to work with very sexual, volatile behavior in a family, but found a way to work with kids to make them safe. There was always a point person. There was never, that child would never be left alone for a nanosecond with the person that had perpetrated, even if they weren't about to again. The kid didn't need the worry on their heart, okay? We learned a whole new way to keep a family together and functional. And guess what? They got even better functional. Just like I tell couples when there's an affair, because at the time this affair bursts through your coupleship, you think, well, that's the end of the world. We can never make it right. And a lot of times it is the end of the marriage or the coupleship, but not always. And if a couple is able to work on it, they often come out with a much better relationship than they went in with. And people hear that from therapists and go, oh, yeah, that's psychobabble.
No, but it's true. It's true.
It's true.
Those big earthquakes can really make things better or sometimes just make things worse.
Yes.
But if we came around these families, instead of saying, oh, you're bad, you're addicted, you're mentally incapable. Instead, we came around with tools and support and childcare and money. I mean, instead of spending the money on the adoption and basically paying for a baby,
yes,
why don't we put that money, if we really, really cared about children, why don't we spend that money on keeping these families together?
Right. And in my side of the world that stays a little secret from your side of the world, the birth mothers, the birth parents who are like, y'all just ran over us. That's what we say all the time over there in those quiet rooms. Like, hey, it's okay for you to put somebody on a GoFundMe page to say, help us get the money for adoption.
Yes.
But if I were to take a mother and say, GoFundMe, can you help this woman so that she can stay with her child?
Yes.
People will say, well, why didn't she get a better job?
Yes.
Well, why'd she run off that man?
Oh, I know. So much judgment.
And it's like that person would be put down for asking for money to help raise her child. Get up out of the ghetto and help yourself. You had the same chance I did.
Yeah. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No, I totally agree with you with that. And yeah, it's disgusting seeing the fundraising for the adoptive families and the foster families that are getting paid. They get paid. Why aren't we paying the original family? It's like,
Yeah, let me add another page to that is yes, because the foster family gets paid to care for them. And the reason that most children are removed in foster care is called money. Money. Now, this is a two-prong. They're removed because the parent didn't have enough money to care for them properly. And in many cases, that's true. That's very true. But they are also removed because now in some states in the United States, the different CPS departments, DFACS departments, whatever it's called in your state.
Like Child Protective Services. Yeah.
Gets a bonus every time they place a child.
What?
Bill Clinton did this for a good reason.
Yeah.
He did this when he was president to try to get all those children out of foster care that had been placed in foster care, but there were never any plans made they were supposed to be reunified, but never got around to that. So then maybe they'd be adopted, but sometimes they never got around to that. Well, once Bill Clinton started giving a bonus for placing a child, there are several states who make a multi-million-dollar budget by how many children they remove from parents and place for adoption. And hang on, if the adoption doesn't work out and that requires a rehoming.
Well,
that's okay. Because guess what?
They get it again.
They get the bonus again. So if these settings don't work out, or if not good care was taken in planning a good adoption, then the kid gets adopted again and again.
Oh, man.
Any place you put money, just hold on because the horrors of earth are going to come and follow it and find a way to get it.
Intercountry adoption adds giant more layer of money and unethical situations. So
there you go.
Big stuff. Oh, okay. So Leslie, fix it. What do we do? Yes. You have 1 minute left. What are we going to do?
We've got 1 minute left. One thing that I was somewhere the other day and probably kvetching and moaning about, the state of the world. And this woman said to me, have you seen these new kids? The Gretas, the kids from Marjorie, whatever that high school was. And I said, oh God, I send them money. I do everything I can to support these kids. She said, Leslie, quit worrying. We're in good hands.
They'll be okay. The kids are okay.
These kids have got it. Yeah. They've got it better than any other generation to date. And I can only believe that that's going to improve. And I said, yep. And they love each other.
Yeah.
And they don't care that one another are different.
Yeah. They're much better about that. It is getting much better in their generation. Yeah. The adults, not so much, but I really hope that Joey, as he gets more stable from substances and all that, that he will be a giant voice in this and that he will help a lot of other adoptees and other adoptive families understand what's going on. He has such a heart for this. And if anyone ever wonders, Joey's totally on board. He hasn't been around for a little bit, but every once in a while I'll say, Joey, are you still fine with us blabbing everything about our life on to the public? And he said, yes, Mom, do it. We need to get this out there. So he's one of those Greta's that is going to be changing the world, I pray, someday.
He's going to be in such good stead. Yeah. And anybody that's come to it like your son has, I just think it's all for the good for him. Because the more he talks, I tell people all the time, we can't change what happened. Okay, if I could, I would, but I can't.
Me too.
But what I can do is help somebody else not have to go through it the way that you and I have had to go through it, the way that Joey's had to deal with it. And it's kind of like Mothers About Drunk Drivers. Yep. When they formed their organization, their child was gone. Yeah. There's nothing they could do to bring their child back. Yep. But if they could help one other parent, that's what healed them. Yeah. That's why I do this work.
Me too.
I want to be healed as best I humanly can. That's everybody's goal in life. And if I can give somebody else a leg up, then I have a purpose. Yeah. That's what I'm here for.
I am right with you there. I totally believe that too. And it helps me, honestly. Selfishly, it helps me to know that I'm helping somebody else. At least this pain can go somewhere. So
that's right. Yeah. That's right. That's what our mothers called making lemonade.
Yes, we're making lemonade out of these lemons. Yes. So hopefully, everybody just does a little bit better every day, and we'll just keep working on this to keep hacking it away.
That's all we can do. Yeah. That's all we can do.
Well, thank you, Leslie, for opening and sharing your story. I'm sure it takes a lot of emotional energy to do this all the time. And I so appreciate you telling our listeners about your story and your work in the adoption space. You're doing amazing things. And I just admire you so much. And I want to be like you when I grow up. So
thank you. Thank you. That warms my heart. And it is. It's good for me too. This has been my freedom to, I remember first saying, the truth will set you free. I went to church right across from the Martin Luther King Center.
Really?
I have always been in the midst of civil rights, but the truth does set you free.
It does.
Keeping a secret took so much out of me.
So much energy to hold it down. Yeah. Let it go. Let it go.
Let her go.
Let it go.
So, I'm very glad to have met you. I flicked across Facebook one day and there you were. And I was like, yes, I want to hear from more adoptive parents. Please come forward.
I'm so glad you found me. This has been amazing. And Leslie, by the way, also participated in one of our aptitude forums for our group for adoptive parents. If any of you are an adoptive parent and want to dig into this stuff, I know it's not fun. It's kind of like trying to sell, I don't know. It's hard to sell this thing because it's like, who wants to dig into this shitty stuff? But if any of you want to, there's a support group for you. And we are willing to look at all the stuff and be there with you as you work through it. So
absolutely. Yeah. And here's my goal. Someday, I hope we can all be in a support group together. But I've tried and I've tried and I've tried and everybody picks on everybody.
Yeah, they do.
Every segment picks on the other segment.
So we'll stay in our silos for a little bit.
A little bit longer, but we'll see.
There is definitely benefit for combining, but it's very tricky to do. I agree.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Leslie, for helping us unravel adoption a bit more and sharing your story and sharing your words of wisdom with us. It's been so great having you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please share this episode with anyone you know who might be touched by adoption or who needs to learn more about adoption, even if they don't have anyone in their personal family that's adopted. And find Unraveling Adoption on all of the social media places you would want to look and at unravelingadoption.com. If you'd like to support the podcast further, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/unravelingadoption. You'll get early episode releases, a shout out on the podcast, and half off of any of our special events that we do. Thank you for listening, everybody. Leslie and I want you to stay safe.